You know the drill. We've all been told that if you just do what society asks, work your 9 to 5, pay your bills on time, and diligently stash a little bit of cash away at the end of the month, you'll be totally fine, right? Well, somehow, life just keeps getting more and more expensive. You're probably noticing your paycheck disappearing faster than ever, and the data completely backs this up. Traditional milestones, things like buying a home, taking a real vacation, or, actually retiring comfortably, are starting to feel like an absolute fantasy for millions of people. So it begs the question, why does working harder literally feel like you're falling behind? If you're feeling this squeeze right now, take a deep breath, because the numbers show it is definitely not because you're lazy or just terrible with your money. You're feeling this friction because the entire economic environment we live in has fundamentally shifted right under our feet. The simple, undeniable truth here is that the rules of the game have completely changed. So in this explainer, we are going to unpack exactly why the middle class, at least as we once knew it, is quietly disappearing. And much more importantly, we're going to talk about what you can actually do to adapt before it's too late. Think about the old promise from a generation ago. It was pretty straightforward, right? Study hard, get a stable job, and boom, one income could often support an entire family, buy a perfectly nice home, and even cover manageable college tuition. Now, compare that to our new reality. Today, dual incomes aren't just nice to have, they are often a basic requirement just to keep your head above water. We are facing runaway costs for everyday essentials. And as a direct result, those classic life milestones, they're just constantly being delayed. The math simply doesn't add up the way it used to. And this fading of the middle-class dream, it didn't just vanish overnight. It happened incredibly slowly and quietly. Back in the 1980s, a middle-class salary actually bought you a middle-class life. Then by the 2000s, costs for big-ticket items like higher education and healthcare really began to creep upward, which brings us to the 2020s, where we find ourselves in what economists call the silent squeeze. Everyday essentials are surging, making it incredibly difficult to just breathe financially. Now, we all know the technical term for this squeeze is inflation, but in practical, everyday terms, it just means your money buys a little bit less every single year. For ordinary families, it feels exactly like running on a treadmill where someone just keeps turning up the speed. You're sweating, you're putting in way more hours, maybe you're even getting promoted, yet you still end up falling behind, simply because your salary isn't magically doubling alongside the cost of your groceries and gas. And we really have to talk about the massive elephant in the room here, which is housing. A generation ago, buying a home was a challenge, for sure, but it was an achievable one. Today, house prices have absolutely skyrocketed. In some major markets, they have doubled in just a few short years. Meanwhile, the wages we take home haven't even come close to keeping pace with that kind of explosive growth. Because home ownership feels so out of reach now, folks are forced to rent for much longer. And what does that mean? It means you're forced to spend years, sometimes decades, paying someone else's mortgage instead of building your own wealth. When you rent for that long, or you delay marriage or put off having kids, you're missing out on the absolute bedrock of the traditional middle class, which is owning assets. Without assets, building a secure financial future becomes a massive, massive uphill battle. So we have to ask the obvious question. What happens when life becomes wildly expensive, but, you still need to live it? When all these external pressures, runaway housing, nonstop inflation, bear down on a household, how do people respond internally just to survive the month? Well, they turn to the debt trap. The usual suspects are literally everywhere you look. High-interest credit cards, depreciating car loans, personal loans, and those buy now, pay later buttons on every checkout page. At first, leaning on these options feels genuinely helpful. It feels like a total lifeline. But then, it just becomes normal. And eventually, a massive chunk of every single paycheck is going straight out the door just to pay for yesterday. You end up working your tail off, not to move forward, but simply to stay exactly where you are. The truly hidden consequence of this whole debt cycle is what's called an invisible wealth transfer. Every single day, your money is quietly flowing away from you. Your rent checks, they're building a landlord's wealth. Your credit card interest payments, that becomes a lender's income. And only a tiny, tiny sliver remains for you. It creates this growing, compounding gap between everyday people and the people who already own assets. But hey, it's not just external costs hurting us. It's also our own habits reacting to a tough environment. We call this lifestyle inflation. Imagine you finally get that raise. You worked hard for it. You definitely deserve a reward, right? So you upgrade your phone, maybe move into a slightly bigger apartment, or finance a newer car. Basically, your expenses rise to perfectly match your new income. From the outside, you look incredibly successful. But behind the scenes, you are completely trapped in a paycheck-to-paycheck cycle because every new dollar is already spoken for. So if we summarize the real danger here, it's a combination of all these slow-moving factors. Rising costs quietly squeeze your wallet. Easy access to debt masks the underlying problem. Massive housing challenges prevent you from building a solid foundation. And expanding spending habits just eat up your hard-earned raises. Over the years, these factors merge to make severe financial pressure feel completely normal. And honestly, the true danger is that when pressure feels normal, we stop asking why we're struggling in the first place. Okay, let's hit pause for a second. If this is our stark economic reality, how on earth do some people still manage to build wealth? What exactly are they doing differently? Because I promise you, they aren't all earning millions of dollars a year, and they certainly don't possess some magical secret knowledge. The answer comes down to a really fundamental shift in mindset. See, the middle-class focus is almost entirely on earning more. It's about getting a better salary, negotiating a higher hourly rate, or chasing a bigger year-end bonus. But the wealthy focus is completely different. They focus on owning more. They are quite literally playing a completely different game. The crucial point to remember is this. Income pays your bills, but assets build your future. I want you to think about this deeply for a second. A salary can stop tomorrow. You could get laid off, or you could get sick. But a business, a diversified investment portfolio, or a rental property, those assets continue generating value long after you've gone to sleep. You absolutely have to make your money work for you. The wealthy don't just trade their time for a paycheck and call it a day. They deploy their capital. They send their dollars out into the world like little employees to work for them, which completely breaks that exhausting cycle of just earning money to pay the next set of bills. So escaping this middle-class trap requires a few highly actionable habits. First, you have to stop lifestyle inflation in its tracks by strictly living below your means. Next, start investing consistently. And remember, consistency beats perfect timing every single day of the week. Continuously invest in your financial education, avoid unnecessary high-interest debt at all costs, and finally, think long-term. People drastically overestimate what they can do in 1 year, but they vastly underestimate what disciplined habits can accomplish over 10 years. Now, I know the economic environment feels super tough right now, but the research clearly highlights what you can actively control. You do not have to figure out how to stop global inflation or perfectly predict the stock market. You just need to manage your own informed financial decisions. How much you save, what you take the time to learn, the debt you choose to take on, and your overall commitment to building assets over time. The absolute greatest risk today is clinging to an outdated promise. The reality is, hard work alone won't automatically create wealth anymore. Millions of people are working just as hard as previous generations did, but because the economic rules have shifted, you have to combine that hard work with strategic asset building if you actually want to get ahead. Which leaves us with one final vital question as we wrap up this explainer. I want you to look at your own life and ask yourself honestly, are you just working for your money, or is your money actually working for you? Understanding this distinction isn't just about becoming richer, it's about becoming freer. Start making those informed decisions, start acquiring assets, and go rewrite your own financial rules.